why does Bitcoin not have privacy encryption built into the base layer? Why does it not have Turing complete smart contract capabilities? Well, this is the question I want to answer, and this video will probably get a little bit of dislikes from the altcoiners out there that think these things are really important to have. And I do think that these things are important to have, but not on the base layer. And I want to explain why that some of these questions that might arise as you learn about Bitcoin, you start to ask yourself, well, why does Bitcoin function this way? Why do blocks take 10 minutes to complete? You end up going down the road of discovery and finding out that it is intentionally built in the way that it's built for a reason. I'm going to explain some of those reasons, some of the criticisms of Bitcoin, and explain why Bitcoin is built the way it is. My name is Forrest Hodel. I'm a Bitcoin educator, and I actually do one-on-one coaching sessions if you need a bit of a deeper dive or go over your security best practices and answer the questions that you might not even know to ask. You can book a session with me. Links in the description. pathtobitcoin.xyz is the website. So I mentioned a few different criticisms there. Basically, to sum this all up to start with, and I'll go into some of the specifics afterwards, to sum it up, the base layer should be as simple as possible. Now, the reason for that is because complexity in software leads to vulnerabilities. So the simpler something it is, the more robust it is. And I have this tweet here from Trollstein. It says 100% uptime, this hits hard. So this is in relation to the last 365 days of Bitcoin being up and operating as a network 100% of the time for the last 365 days. Now, it has had blips in its past before that, but it essentially equates to 99.99% of uptime at this point. So, actually right here, 99.99% lifetime. So Cloudflare was out for 2 hours. AWS 15 hours, Microsoft's Azure 8 hours, Google 6+ hours, all had major outages recently. So these are all cloud services that are the infrastructure for data for the internet. So the internet is essentially a network where you are connecting to data that is stored elsewhere to provide even the website that I'm looking at, Trollstein's tweet, that is stored somewhere, and I'm retrieving it from that database. And essentially, there's been times in recent history where that data is inaccessible because of a vulnerability with that cloud service provider. He continues on here, Bitcoin equals the largest, most secure, most decentralized computing network on the planet. 11 plus years of 100% uptime, 99.99% uptime in the lifetime, an amazing feat of strength and resilience. When you are building something that is intended to be the base layer of the financial system, you need absolute certainty that it's going to work. The reason for that is because if you have certainty in something, you can trust it. And if you have trust, you can build upon it. You can build a foundation on it. So if there's a complexity within the system, if there's the encryption to be able to shield your coins, to have additional privacy, that brings into question how much max supply there is in these privacy coins. Is there something going on behind the scenes that we cannot see because of the encryption, because of the intentional communication that is encrypted? And does that leave vulnerabilities? And all of those are questions that, if asked, you begin to have less trust in the system because you have to trust that the encryption's working and all of the other systems are, the complex systems are working as intended, and nobody has found a vulnerability that they are now exploiting. So with Bitcoin, what I'm talking about here is the transparency. People are now saying the transparency is a bug, that the fact that you can look at a Bitcoin wallet that sent you Bitcoin and trace that Bitcoin back in chunks, right? It's going to be split up over time back to an exchange, back to the Coinbase of it actually being released into the world for the first time as being a bug. Now, what this does, however, is this is the simplest way, being able to have the transparent blockchain. This is the simple, right? We go back. The simplest solution is the best for building the base layer monetary network because it requires the least amount of trust. This is the simplest way of ensuring that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, because anybody can run a node on a relatively low spec device and validate and actually look. If they wanted to, you could physically look through every single block and see from the beginning 50 Bitcoin being released from the Coinbase each time. You could follow those forward to where they are today in whatever wallet they are existing today. You can see that 50 Bitcoin did not all of a sudden multiply or get shielded, and now it becomes you need an additional way to look into and validate that those coins exist and trust along the way. So that is the reason why Bitcoin is transparent. So a lot of altcoins, right, they're going to be marketed in a way where they're Bitcoin but better in this way. So they're Bitcoin but faster, they're Bitcoin but private, they're Bitcoin but this and that, right? They have smart contract capability. Every single time you see that, as someone that's new to Bitcoin and crypto, you might ask yourself, is this true? And if that is true, then why is this not just better Bitcoin? Why shouldn't I buy something that is better than Bitcoin, right? And it's going to beat Bitcoin because of this fact in this way that it's better. Now, every time you see that, that should be a question of, why did Bitcoin not adopt this? Why is Bitcoin not like this? That should be the question that you ask yourself. And if you go deeper into that, again, you find that the simplest solution is the best for long-term stability, and stability is paramount to the security of the network, which leads to trust, and therefore the ability to not have to trust other systems within there. Now, what's interesting about Bitcoin is Bitcoin has decided to scale in layers. It can be more private in a layer 2. It can move faster. The payments can move faster in a layer 2. Now, layer 2s require more trust. But what's interesting about this is layer 2s could completely fail individually. So let's take Lightning, for example, which the Lightning network has encryption. It can have routing, which acts similarly to how the Tor network might work. And it allows for the lockup of Bitcoin and then the value transfer of that Bitcoin within that multisig. And then when it closes out onto the main chain, all the Bitcoin goes to the respected owners on chain. So that's an incredible system, an incredible layer 2 system that's built on top of Bitcoin that has additional complexity. So right now there's 5,300 Bitcoin on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. That's really not that much Bitcoin, but the Lightning Network sells huge amounts of value because that Bitcoin is just being moved around a bunch. Now, is there the possibility of a custodial Lightning service actually creating paper Bitcoin and pretending to move stuff around the Lightning Network, and people just aren't validating and aren't figuring all of that out? Yes. So these additional layers do need more trust. Is there the potential for a vulnerability within Lightning that ends up destroying the entire routing network or something like that? Yeah, sure, there is the possibility of it. But does any of that actually affect Bitcoin? It affects the users of the Lightning Network. The Bitcoin on the Lightning Network might be affected in some way, but ultimately it does not affect the Bitcoin network itself. So the Lightning Network could have a catastrophic bug. It absolutely gets torn down, broken apart, destroyed. All those 5,000 Bitcoin become lost or something, or stolen, and yet the Bitcoin network is unaffected. Now, if we were to put the Lightning Network on Bitcoin, right, not the layer 2, but in Bitcoin's code, do a hard fork and do everything that the Lightning Network enables, but on the layer 1, and we have that same catastrophic bug, now the layer 1 is broken. So it's actually safer to do these things on layer 2s, to sort of have a playground, an ability to mess around with things, have things break, and yet it still does not break Bitcoin. Are any of these layer 2s perfect? Absolutely not. Do they work in some ways for some functions? Absolutely. The Lightning Network is actually incredibly underrated for payments that are restricted by the amount of Bitcoin. Now, there is the ability for exchanges and custodians to play around with paper games, but they'll be found out relatively soon because it is still restricted by the layer 1, which cannot be messed with. That is absolutely so vitally important that the layer 1 stays structurally strong and does not have outages and does not have additional software which could have problems into the future. So ask yourself, if we have Bitcoin blocks coming in faster than 10 minutes, what does that increase the likelihood of? That increases the likelihood of chain splits, of not knowing what the longest chain is because two miners hit blocks relatively at the same time, and they're spreading those different chains through the network, and different competing blocks are being mined, and chains will get orphaned. And basically 10 minutes is this middle ground where that happens, but only at a very, very small degree, and at such a small degree that it isn't affecting the uptime of the Bitcoin network. And we could all agree on the longest chain. Could that be changed in the future? Hopefully, only if we have a way of being 100% assured that we're going to have the same amount of uptime and assurance, and we're not going to also increase massively the amount of block space that is needing to be stored, and cause the problem of people not being able to validate and not be able to run full archival nodes of Bitcoin. So everything that you might see as a problem with Bitcoin, at least in my case, I have looked at every single problem that I have seen with Bitcoin coming into this space and learning about, and saying, okay, well, 10 minutes is pretty slow. Why is it 10 minutes? When you go deeper down, you start to realize, okay, well, there's a reason for it being that slow. There's a reason why it's transparent. There's a reason why we've decided to scale in layers and have the additional ability on these other layers that are connected to Bitcoin. We have minimum ability to do smart contract capabilities on Bitcoin. And again, there's a reason for that. If we add full Turing complete smart contract capabilities on Bitcoin, the code becomes more complex. We start building this Rube Goldberg machine that we actually just want as the cement foundation for a skyscraper of finance. We actually don't want the foundation. When you're pouring a concrete foundation, you also don't want it to be see-through like windows. You don't want it to have doors. You don't need it to have steel beams. All of that stuff gets added to it. You just need it to do one simple thing. You need the concrete to be as dumb as possible. That's what the Bitcoin network is. It is as dumb as possible intentionally so that it can do one thing really well, which is being able to send data or value in the form of Bitcoin that cannot be created without additional cost, and is finite and restricted with the issuance to and from different wallet addresses to transfer value. That's what Bitcoin is good at, and it is good at restricting, again, the creation of more of it. And that's what the difficulty adjustment does. That's what the halving does. That's what the mining system, the mining hashing system does. All of this works as simply and as well as it possibly could today. And will we change it? Will we upgrade it? Will we do this and that? Maybe, but a lot of that will just happen on second and third layers, where we can have a playground, we can mess around with this stuff, and we aren't threatening the base layer of money, right? And why is that so important? I want to just touch on that one more time. It's so important to have stability with the new financial system that we're building, because the current financial system that we have does not have stability. And the fact that it's so easy to manipulate by people is the fact of why and how it is broken, right? So we do not want to create something that we already exist in. We want Bitcoin to be unique and special in these specific ways so that it cannot be manipulated, just as the fiat system is. The fiat system is what we are escaping, and crypto is just another version of the fiat system, and that is what makes Bitcoin special. So hopefully that all made sense to you. If you guys have any questions, if you have any other video topics, comment them in the comment section below. Again, if you want to book a session with me one-on-one, we can talk about your Bitcoin best practices. You can book a session with me through the link in the description. I also have a code for Bitcoin Well. It's my favorite exchange to use. You would get bonus rewards for using my link to sign up. There's also the Cold Card link, 5% off of the Start9 to run your own Bitcoin node, 15% off of the Stampseed kit to preserve your seed phrases in titanium. It's a great way to preserve those seed phrases. 5% off of privacy phones to keep your data away from large companies. And basically everything you need as a Bitcoiner is linked in the description. You can become a sovereign Bitcoiner just by, working through those skills of using those things, and all those links are there. Appreciate you all. Thanks everybody, and see you on the next episode of Bitcoin, Not Crypto.